to turn over to Tim and Shab.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I was sharing earlier that I'm not in top form. I'm sure that there's somebody in solidarity with me in the crowd right now that's also not in top form. I'm just tired. It's been a tough 2 days. But I know we're here I know a lot of you guys have background information on Occupy Atlanta, right?
Yes.
How many people have been following the Occupy movement nationally? Anybody raise your hand? And I know part of the class is going to be following Occupy Atlanta. How many people have been Googling, checking out the website? Raise your hand if you know any. Okay. All right, those are most people. All right, so what we want to do this morning is just give like a brief overview of kind of what started the movement, a little bit about what we've done in Atlanta so far, and we're going to try to keep that brief and then open it up for any questions that you guys have. So Occupy Atlanta is an offshoot of Occupy Wall Street, which really was inspired by Arab Spring. Folks are aware of Arab Spring, right? I think December 18th of 2010, there was a Tunisian fruit vendor who was just totally fed up. He had been like accosted by police who were giving him a hard time about selling his goods, and I think he did something that sort of like I guess encompassed the frustrations of a whole region of the world. He went in front of a government building and set himself on fire. And that really what started Arab Spring, and that frustration kind of like it really resonated with the people in Tunisia. It started a people's movement, and that spread through the Middle East. And one of the most publicized countries that was Egypt. And in Egypt, we heard so much about Tahrir Square and the occupation of Tahrir Square. And activists in Egypt and Cairo, they had this idea, this concept that we're just simply going to go to a public place, a visible place, and we're not going to leave until these changes are made. We're just not going to leave, and it's going to be impossible to ignore us. So their idea was, by refusing to leave, by claiming a piece of public space, that they would force a conversation with their community, and it worked. And now their revolution is only halfway done, but that inspired a nation. I mean, that inspired the whole world. How many people remember that time frame when Tahrir Square was first being occupied? I mean, it was inspirational, and there was folks in Wall Street in New York that saw that too. Activists in New York that were like, "Wow, this is like an amazing tactic," and they thought about trying it out themselves.
So, this is just a flyer for kind of the first call out for the occupation, September 17th, down on Wall Street. I don't know how many people actually noticed it then. It wasn't, by that point, it definitely wasn't like a huge international thing in the way that it has been. I think they had maybe 100 people show up down on Wall Street that day, and then moved over to Zuccotti Park. And I think, I'm not sure, to me, I think the moment that people really started paying attention was the mass arrest that took place on the Brooklyn Bridge it was October 1st. So, there's different accounts of how it went down, but 700 people were arrested simply just for walking on the bridge. There's different accounts of whether or not they were led onto the bridge mistakenly by the police, but either way, 700 people were arrested. So I think that is the moment that most people kind of started to pay attention to the movement.
And we saw people like with nets thrown on them. You could look at the YouTube footage of people getting sprayed with pepper spray. I know me personally, that's when I first started paying attention. I had gotten emails about Occupy Wall Street right before it started, and it was kind of like not really on my radar. And when I saw the footage of people being pepper sprayed and netted for just like standing there, journalists being arrested, I think I like Shab and people all over the country were like, oh my God, these guys, obviously this small group of folks like present a real threat to the system. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so harsh on them. And the greatest outreach tool for this movement was the New York Police Department. They're the ones that really kind of spread it. And it's like not unlike Tahrir Square. So, Shab, you want to talk about this one?
Okay, and so within a couple of weeks, I think there was close to 1,500 different general assemblies or meetings that took place across the country in different cities, people that said they wanted to try to get something started. So we had a couple of meetings here in Atlanta, and then this is October 7th, which is what we kind of consider to be our launching day. So this was the day we got to Woodruff Park. We hadn't quite decided 100% whether or not we were going to occupy, but the turnout was great and everybody was really excited, so we decided to stay. There's just a few pictures of that. So it was, an amazing turnout. I think that it shows that a lot of people all over the country are kind of ready to start talking about the things that are wrong and what we can do to fix them. So, and then we started occupying Woodruff Park, which we actually renamed at the time Troy Davis Park, just symbolically for ourselves. This was just a couple of weeks after the execution of Troy Davis, which was something that I think a lot of people here in Atlanta and around the world were really impacted by. So.
And what you saw in other cities, in most cities, is that the reclaiming of public space comes with the renaming of the space. Whether it's, I think they called Zuccotti Park sometimes Liberty Square, and there was Bloombergville was another one. And I know in Oakland, maybe Oscar Grant. Yeah. So we were just sort of following that tradition. So if you go, I think to this day, if you go to Google Earth, this is what you see. This is the aerial view of, I think halfway through our park occupation of Troy Davis Park. And you don't see a snapshot of the whole park, but I think at the height of the park occupation, we had 86 tents, plus, like here, this is our media tent right here. This is childcare, which was free. You don't see like the medic tent over here. We actually have a giant, huge carnival tent that's not in the shot, where we have community meetings. This is our supply room, and this is a makeshift church. There's a lot of people that aren't religious, but there was many that were. So they made a church that actually had service every day. So it was quite. There was like a little village emerging, and that little village emerged in cities all over the country.
So, and I know a lot of people kind of, one of the questions that we get a lot is like why the park, why the occupation. So it makes people, it's almost in a sense a publicity stunt, if you will, like just like in Tahrir Square. It's a way to force our voice to be heard. Everybody around the world paid attention when we started occupying a park. And also sort of, it's put the wheels in motion for people to get together and discuss ideas around the clock, what we can do, and also starting to build sort of model for a world we'd like to see. Whether that's from, and we've continued that even after the park, whether that's from like, urban, we have like a rooftop garden and different farming groups within Occupy. We have a co-op bike shop. We have just different things that people are working on to sort of try to be self-sustainable more.
Yeah, and one of the ideas behind the park occupation too is that because there's so much wealth disparity, not just in Atlanta but the whole country. Atlanta's bad. It's almost 70%. Yeah, worst urban area in the country. Almost 70% of the resources are controlled by 1% of the population. When I say resources, I don't just mean like income. That's also like property, investments, like that. And what we see around the country is almost 50% of the resources controlled by 1%. So what does this mean? Part of what it means is, does it mean that every politician is bought out? No, not necessarily, but a lot of them are. Enough of them are. There's enough money that's pumped into politics And we can't really, we don't live in a world where our voices are elevated to the same level politically. The political system broke it to a degree that getting a petition signed, or going down to the Gold Dome and talking to my representative, is just not going to cut it anymore. We have to find new provocative ways to raise a new voice in the political landscape, and that's what the park occupations on Wall Street and across the country are about forcing a microphone for this political voice that had been very, very much snuffed out for a long time. People just weren't talking about wealth disparity, and regardless of what you think about the Occupy movement, people are talking about wealth disparity now. Folks are talking about 99%, 1%. People, the concept is out there. So in that sense, the movement, if that's all the movement does, it's been successful at this point. It has forced the conversation about wealth disparity.
It's just like a picture of a food table.
So like along the lines of the food table though too, we were giving out, at our height, we were giving out 800 meals a day in the park.
To anyone who wanted one.
Yeah, not just to occupiers, to anybody, to folks that had been occupying for many years before we came along. So it's Shab mentioned education. There was the park was around the clock opportunities to educate each other and to try not only to talk about hey, what's the world that we want to live in, but to try to start an experiment. And that's really what the park was, an experiment. We reached out, I forget whether we reached out to them or they reached out to us, but the King Center, we started talking to the King Center, and Shab and I, it was both of us that went, and a few others. We were invited by Bernice King to, Martin Luther King's daughter, over to the King Center, and we met with the King Center staff and Bernice, and she just had a lot of questions about the Occupy movement. And it was a little intimidating. I don't know if anybody's ever met Bernice or seen her speak. They say that she got Martin Luther King's gift of speaking. She's a great speaker, and she looks just like him.
She really
in the face, she looks just like him.
It's crazy.
And so the two of us were in there with a few, I think Joe Beasley and Derek Bozeman and maybe Senator Ford. And I forget everything that was said at me, but at one point she looked at us and said, I want you to know that my father would be proud of y'all. Man. And she said that he was killed for the work that he was doing around economic justice. And what you guys are doing is an extension of the Poor People's Campaign, which was an occupation of Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King brought low-income folks from around the country, white and black, and set up a tent city right on the mall. And they were met with striking government force that just bulldozed the thing. So this is the King Center giving us training.
Okay. So this was one of our first, I think this was like a weekend, this was one of our first marches and demonstrations that we did, which was at the Bank of America Plaza. I think the banks are, really tied into sort of the enemy across the board. People associate with banks, and it's for good reason for the most part. The banks are just a symbol of an industry where they have enough money to be able to write their own laws to regulate themselves, and be able to negotiate bailouts when things are tough for them, but without their CEOs are still making huge bonuses while they're foreclosing on millions of homes and not lending to people that need it.